When you speak, your voice is your most important tool. Fortunately, you can learn to use your voice like playing a musical instrument to increase your power and persuasiveness in any conversation or speech that you give. All successful people are excellent communicators. In fact, the work at Harvard University on multiple intelligences concluded that social intelligence, the ability to interact well with others, is the highest paid and most respected intelligence in our society. Communicate more effectively with others.
Now, the first one is a profound communication principle that comes from the book, The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And if you haven't read that book, I highly recommend it. And the first agreement he teaches in the book is be impeccable with your word. And what that means is to speak with integrity, which means to say what you mean and mean what you say. Now, as I just mentioned, words have the power to create or destroy, and a careless comment can alter a relationship forever. So it's a good idea to choose your words carefully and consider their impact before you put them out there in the world. So before you speak or write, I want you to ask yourself these 4 questions. Is it necessary? Is it true? Is it kind? And is it helpful? And if you don't get yeses, when you say frivolous, untrue, mean, or unhelpful things, it doesn't create a sense of trust or connection in the other person you're communicating with. And by the way, the same guideline also goes for the words you say to yourself.
One of the things I observe is simply this. A lot of people are very careless with their language. I mean, the words you use either lift up your energy, the words you use either make you more creative, or the words you use could reduce your energy. I mean, words have destroyed nations. I mean, think about the great dictators. Their words of hatred, their words of toxicity, their words of breakdown caused the people around them to do sometimes incredibly terrifying acts. And then you look at people like a Nelson Mandela or a Martin Luther King Jr. or a Mother Teresa. You look at the great business builders. You look at humanitarians. You look at a lot of the great artists. And they were so careful with their words. And their words lifted people up. And that's really what great leaders do. They use the language of leadership. You look at a victim, and they say things like, this is a problem. I've got a problem right here. Or I'm really scared about this. Or I hate that client. Or I hate this work. Or I'm sick of this day. Or I'm exhausted. Or I don't like that. Or she never likes me. It's literally the language of toxicity. And the words you use really are like a context or a framework or a stained glass window on the way you see the world. I mean, here's a game-changing insight. You see the world not as it is, you see the world as you are. You see the world through a lens, and your language forms that lens of belief. And I see this everywhere. Someone very close to me who was a little sloppy with her languaging said, oh, I forgot to do this. It's not on my to-do list. I should punch myself in the face. If you say that every day, what's that doing to your self-esteem? If you say that over a lifetime, what's that doing to your self-identity? And as you know, your income is a function of your self-identity. And your performance is a reflection of your personal story. And the way you build your self-architecture and the way you see yourself in the world is in part through your words. You're never going to rise any higher in terms of your impact in the world than the way you see yourself. If you see yourself as average, well, you're not going to read the books, go to the events, do the study, put in the training time, find the mentors, do the work to rise to world class, because you're running an interior psychological story that says you're average and the A players are somehow different from you. If deep down inside you're coming from scarcity and you think, you know what, I'll never have more than the salary that I'm making because of the story that you have through the words you've used, well, then you're not going to go out there and ask for the big order. You're not going to go start the big business. You're not going to read the books on financial mastery because deep inside you would say, what would be the point? I'm not one of those people. And if you want to rewire your self-identity, So you go out in the world and you're literally operating at legendary, then you absolutely must dial into this first point of what legendary leaders do in terms of the way they speak, which is get your precision of languaging right. Because like I say, the great leaders, how did they transform humanity? It was through their words. How did the great military generals get their armies to go out there on fire? It was through their words. So calibrate your languaging so your words to yourself are world class. And also the words you use to your team, to your customers, to your loved ones. So incredibly important. If you look at the 95% card-carrying members of the cult of mediocrity, they're so sloppy with their languaging. Don't be silly. I hate that customer. This job is going to make me sick. And they repeat it over and over, and then they wonder why they have an illness 10 or 15 years down the road.
And this leads me to the next communication skill that's probably the most critical skill for everyone on the planet to master. And that is the skill of effective listening. Now, the undeniable truth is that so many of us are terrible listeners. We pretend we're listening, but we're really just thinking about what we're going to say next. We're rehearsing. We're so worried about getting our point across that we pay very little attention to what the other person is trying to say. And there can never be effective communication without both parties being as focused on the listening part as they are on the speaking part. Because if you aren't really listening and responding to what the other person is actually saying, ultimately all you're really doing is having a conversation with yourself. Now, here's an invaluable tip. Whenever you're having an important conversation, could be with your spouse or your partner, with a child, with an employee or a customer, or someone on the other side of the political divide, let them go first. Don't interrupt them and argue with them. Let them empty themselves out first. Remember this, you can't pour water into a full glass. You have to let the water out before you can have more put in. Instead, really listen to their point of view. Be curious. How is it that they've come to feel this way, to have this point of view? What is it that they are needing you to hear? Now, this takes a commitment to really want to know what the other person is experiencing and needing. And I can tell you from my experiences having worked with couples, corporate teams, and diverse community groups, it takes time for people to really feel they've been heard. But if you invest the time and the intention to do that, they will then be ready to hear you and what you're experiencing, what you're needing, and what you're wanting. And by the way, a really great technique you can use to facilitate and practice this kind of listening is a technique we call a heart talk. Now, in a heart talk, whether it's between two people, like a husband and wife, or a group of people sitting in a circle at a staff meeting, the person who is speaking holds a physical object like a ball or a stuffed animal or a water bottle and talks for as long as they need to about the topic at hand without anyone interrupting them, disagreeing with them, or stealing the focus until that person is totally complete with whatever they want to say. And then the person passes the object to the other person or to the next person in the group. Now let me say one more thing about when in doubt, check it out. Sometimes when you've done your best to listen closely to someone, you may not have heard exactly what it was they were trying to say. And that's why it's so important for you to double check and make sure you really understood them correctly. And the easiest way to do that is before you speak to say, so what I'm hearing you say is, and then repeat back to them what you think they were saying, what they meant to say. And then give them the opportunity to clarify any misunderstandings that you might have before you respond to them. So it's always best to make sure you're really responding to what they're really saying instead of what you think they're saying.
Number 3, speak your truth even when your voice shakes. The conversation you are most resisting is the conversation you most need to have. What do I mean by that? Well, all too often, we get hurt by someone or we get upset by someone. It could be a work colleague, it could be at home in our family life. And we are almost taught by society not to speak up. We are afraid, of being laughed at. People could think we're weird. We could fail. And a lot of us, we think, we could lose the relationship and end up alone. It's fear. And so what it is, it's almost like non-communication born of fear. But the most effective human beings on the planet all have one thing in common. And they speak up and they share their truth. And the more you practice, again, the quality of your performance is all about the quality of your practice. And the more you actually practice speaking up when you know you want to speak up, the more you will actually step into your next level of power. And the more you actually betray yourself by not speaking up when maybe someone in a restaurant is serving you and they're not being polite, or maybe a client is being disrespectful, or maybe someone on the street is doing something that is dishonoring your humanity. Every single time you swallow what you most need to say, you actually lose power. You actually become more and more impotent as a human being. I mean, because you know this, we give away our power to the things that we avoid. The hard talks, when you actually speak up, are when you grow in power. And you actually not only grow in power, you build intimacy in the relationship. I mean, just think about it. When you actually speak up with someone and you tell them how you're feeling and you tell them what's most important to you, well, if it's the right relationship, one that's meant to be in your life, whether it's professional or personal, that is really a gateway into the other person having the permission to open up as well. And then you have two mature people talking about what's really most important versus sidestepping the truth. Remember this incredibly important brain tattoo. You can say whatever you want so long as you say it with respect. I mean, if someone has been rude to you in a coffee shop, if your friend is late for dinner and it's important to you that they're on time, well, if you lash out at them and say, "Why were you late? I'm angry," that's going to put them into attack mode, which is going to cause them to be defensive. But if you say to them, Johnny or Ravi, whatever their name is, if you say, "You know what, thank you so much for joining me for dinner. Before we get started and enjoy this incredible meal, if I may, I'd just like to share something with deep respect. Punctuality is so important to me, and I've been waiting here for half an hour, and your time is valuable, and my time is valuable. And I'd be ever so grateful if when we get together, you would respect my time just like I want to respect your time." You've said it with respect. Look how powerful that is. And if it is a healthy person versus a toxic person, they're going to appreciate you being so truthful. And you're also going to teach them the punctuality matters. So the second tactic is you can say whatever you want to a teammate, to an employee, to a customer, to a family member, so long as you say it with love and respect. Number 4.
If you want to make yourself articulate, then not only should you read, but you should write down what you think. And one of the things that just blows me away about universities is that no one ever tells students why they should write something. It's like, well, you have to do this assignment. Well, why are you writing? Well, you need the grade. It's like, no. You need to learn to think. Because thinking makes you act effectively in the world. Thinking makes you win the battles you undertake. And those could be battles for good things. If you can think and speak and write, you are absolutely deadly. Nothing can get in your way. So that's why you learn to write. It's like, and I can't believe that people aren't just told that. It's like, it's the most powerful weapon you can possibly provide someone with. And I know lots of people who've been staggeringly successful and watched them throughout my life. I mean, those people, you don't want to have an argument with them. They'll just slash you into pieces. And not in a malevolent way. It's like, if you're going to make your point and they're going to make their point, you better have your points organized, because otherwise you are going to look like and be an absolute idiot. You are not going to get anywhere. Teach people to be articulate, because that's the most dangerous thing you can possibly be. If you're going to speak effectively, you have to know way more than you're talking about. To do that, you have to do a lot of reading. That's on the input side. And then on the output side, well, there's some techniques, let's say, is like if you're speaking in front of a group, you are not delivering a talk to a group. That's not what you're doing. The talk isn't a packaged thing that you present to a group. There isn't a group. There's a bunch of individuals, and you talk to them. So when I talk to a group, I always talk to people one at a time. And that makes it easier too, because you know how to talk to a person. It's like, can you talk to 1,000 people? Well, probably not, because it's too intimidating. But there isn't 1,000 people there. There's 1,000 individuals. And so you just look at an individual and you say something, and you can tell if they're engaged. They look confused, or they look interested, or they look angry, or they look bored, and they give you feedback about how you're doing. And so one thing is to have something to say, yeah, but the next thing is pay attention to who you're talking to. And so you don't deliver a talk to an audience. That's a really bad way of thinking about it. You're actually engaged in a conversation with an audience. Even if they're not talking, they're nodding and shifting position and, looking like this, and you can pull all that in and use it to govern the level at which you're addressing the entire audience. So the last thing I would say is, well, having the aim to be a good communicator is a good start. There isn't anything that you can possibly do that makes you more competent in everything you do than to learn how to communicate. I don't care if you're going to be a carpenter. I mean, being a carpenter, by the way, is very difficult, especially if you're a good carpenter. But if you're good at communicating as a carpenter, you're like 10 times better as a carpenter. The people that I've watched in my life who've been spectacularly successful they have skills. Clearly, that's a minimum precondition. But they're also very, very good at articulating themselves. And so whenever they negotiate, they're successful. Well, that's kind of like the definition of success in life, right? You negotiate and it doesn't mean you win. Because if you're a good negotiator, if you're a really good negotiator, everybody walks away from the negotiation thrilled. And so then people line up to do things with you. So, and that's all dependent on your ability to communicate. So, practice.
Number 5 key to communications is there are 4 basic personality styles. The first is who we call relators. The relator is very high on people orientation and indirect. They are quiet, self-contained, not particularly expressive. They're sensitive, people-oriented, and concerned about other people's opinions. If you're communicating, this person requires slow, low-key, easygoing, friendly, almost warm and fuzzy. So if you're dealing with relators, you have to go slow and you have to be patient. You can't be pushy because they like time to make decisions and they need time to talk to other people. Their greatest concern in life is, let's get along, let's all be friends. Relators tend to gravitate toward fields where relators are most effective. So you find relators in fields like nursing, social services, counselors, where they relate to other people. Now the next type of person is the analyzer. Now the analyzer is indirect and self-contained, but very task-oriented. This is the kind of person who's not so much concerned about people, but more concerned about doing the job and are more inward-directed. This type of person at the extreme can be an uncommunicative bureaucrat, very meticulous and picky about every detail. Their primary concern is, let's be accurate. They only feel comfortable when the numbers and the details are correct. Now, where do you think they'll gravitate to in terms of work? Well, they'll gravitate toward accounting, computers, engineering, bookkeeping, computer programming. When you're dealing with an analyzer, concentrate on giving them lots of detail because this is what makes them comfortable with a decision. Now, the third type of person is what we call the director. The director, these people are bottom line oriented, impatient. They make quick decisions and they don't need a lot of detail. They're most concerned with let's get results, get to the bottom line, cut to the chase. The fourth type of personality is what we call the socializer. And sometimes they're called expressive. They like to express themselves a lot. The socializer is outgoing, direct, voluble, and very people-oriented. This person's primary motivation is achievement, and achievement with and through other people. They like to talk about achievement. What are you doing? How did you do it? How did it work? Let me tell you what I did and how it worked for me. Many times they become managers or executives because they have highly integrated personalities. They're very concerned about results, but they're also concerned about people. Now, everybody you meet is in one of these 4 quadrants or groups. The mistake that most people make is that they treat everyone else as if they were just the same as they were. However, no matter which style of communicator you are, 3/4 of the people you meet are something else. Now, there's no right or wrong, better or worse style. These are almost born into people. You can see them in children from an early age. However, your job in asking questions and listening to people is to find out which style they are and then to practice personality flexibility so that you can get along with a greater number of different types of people.